Here's a group of people quietly doing something radical. Absolutely nothing, with other people at least. And here's what's wild. Science is starting to reveal that these people aren't antisocial. They aren't damaged. They aren't lonely. Their brains are actually operating on a fundamentally different frequency. What I'm about to share will completely change how you see the people in your life, who'd rather stay home, and maybe how you see yourself. Let's start with a question everyone's thinking. Is there something wrong with people who genuinely prefer solitude? Short answer, no. Longer answer, absolutely not. And here's why. For decades, psychology treated introversion and social withdrawal as problems to be solved, something to fix, something to overcome. But recent neuroscience is flipping that entire narrative on its head, because it turns out people who recharge alone aren't avoiding life. They're processing it differently. Here's the first thing you need to understand. The human brain has two major operating systems running in the background at all times. The first is the default mode network. This is your brain's internal world. It activates when you're daydreaming, reflecting, imagining, planning. The second is the task-positive network. This is your brain's external focus mode. It activates when you're engaged with the outside world, socializing, reacting. Here's the fascinating part. These two networks are like a seesaw. When one goes up, the other goes down. Research out of Harvard found that people who score high in preference for solitude show significantly stronger default mode network activity. Their internal world is richer, more vivid, more engaging. When they're alone, their brain isn't in standby mode. It's running at full capacity, processing, creating, connecting ideas. For these people, solitude isn't emptiness. It's fullness. Now let's talk about overstimulation, because this explains so much. Every social interaction carries a cognitive cost. Reading facial expressions, following conversational threads, managing what you say versus what you think, monitoring tone. Your brain is doing an enormous amount of invisible work. For some people, this work feels energizing. For others, it's genuinely exhausting. A 2020 study published in the Journal of Personality found that people who prefer solitude have higher baseline arousal in their nervous systems. In plain terms, their brains are already running hotter. More stimulation doesn't excite them. It overwhelms them. This isn't a weakness. This is wiring. Think of it like a phone that already has 90% brightness turned on. Adding more light doesn't make the screen clearer. It just drains the battery faster. People who love solitude aren't hiding from the world. They're managing their system intelligently. Now here's something that might surprise you. People who prefer solitude are often exceptionally good at relationships. Just fewer of them. Psychologist Robin Dunbar famously proposed that the human brain can comfortably maintain about 150 social connections. But within that innermost circle, the people you genuinely invest in are usually around 5. People who prefer solitude often operate almost exclusively in that innermost circle. They're not interested in surface-level connections. Small talk feels like a waste of a resource they consider precious. A 2018 study from the University of Virginia found that people with a strong preference for solitude reported deeper satisfaction in the relationships they did maintain. They bring more presence, more intentionality, more depth to their close connections, because they're not spreading the energy across dozens of acquaintances. They don't want 100 friendships. They want 3 that matter. Let's get into something called self-concept clarity, because this is where it gets really interesting. Self-concept clarity is simply how well you know yourself, how consistent and stable your sense of identity is across different situations. Research consistently shows that people who spend more time alone score higher in self-concept clarity. And this makes intuitive sense. When you're constantly surrounded by other people, you're always adapting, mirroring their energy, adjusting your behavior, fitting into the social dynamic. You're always being shaped by others. When you're alone, you stop performing. You stop adapting. And in that stillness, you start to hear what you actually think, what you actually feel, what you actually want. Philosopher Paul Tillich called it the courage to have the ability to exist fully in your own company without needing external validation to feel real. People who prefer solitude often have that courage by default. But let's be honest about the shadow side of this, because this video isn't about putting solitude on a pedestal. There's a difference between chosen solitude and isolation, born from fear. For some people, the preference for being alone is less about enjoying their own company and more about avoiding the vulnerability that comes with real connection. Rejection sensitivity, social anxiety, past experiences of betrayal or humiliation. The question we're sitting with is this: are you alone? Because it feeds you, or because it protects you? One is a genuine personality orientation. The other is a wound, wearing the costume of a preference. Both deserve compassion, but only one deserves to stay. Now let's talk about creativity, because the link here is undeniable. Study after study shows that solitude is one of the most consistent predictors of creative output, not just for artists, for engineers, researchers, writers, entrepreneurs. The reason comes back to the default mode network we talked about earlier. That internal processing system doesn't just reflect, it connects. It takes unrelated ideas and finds unexpected relationships between them. It generates the aha moment in the shower, the solution that appears on a walk, the insight that comes at 2 a.m. when the world is finally quiet. Psychologist Esther Buchholz argued that solitude isn't just compatible with creativity, it's a prerequisite. For it, the mind needs unscheduled, uninterrupted time to do its most original work. Most great art, most breakthrough thinking, most transformative ideas weren't born in meetings. They were born in silence. Here's what researchers call the restoration hypothesis. Psychologists Rachel and Stephen Kaplan propose that human attention has two types: directed attention, focused, effortful, deliberate, and involuntary attention, effortlessly flowing, naturally engaged. Modern life runs almost entirely on directed attention, and it depletes like a muscle that's been overused. We lose focus, we become irritable, we make worse decisions. Solitude, particularly in natural environments, but even in quiet indoor spaces, allows directed attention to rest. While involuntary attention takes over, the mind wanders, it recovers, it returns to full capacity. This is why people who regularly seek solitude often seem calmer, more patient, more focused in their interactions. They're not naturally more disciplined, they're just better rested. So what does all of this mean practically? If you're someone who prefers being alone and has spent years feeling like something is wrong with you, hear this clearly. Your need for solitude is not a defect in your social programming. It's a feature of a particular kind of mind, one that tends to think deeply, feel intensely, create prolifically, and connect authentically. You're not antisocial. You're selectively social. And there's a profound difference. The next time someone tells you you're too quiet, or asks why you didn't come to the party, or assumes your Friday night alone must be lonely, remember what's actually happening inside that brain of yours. It's not sitting idle. It's doing its best work. And if this made you feel genuinely seen for the first time in a while, you might also want to explore why deep thinkers often struggle in a world built for extroverts, and what the tension actually reveals about the way intelligence works, because the quietest people in the room often have the most to say.